my name is Tracy. Welcome to Love Your Shelf. Today I want to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is travel in books. And I decided that I'm actually going to make this two parts. So part of it is going to be travel nonfiction and part's going to be travel fiction because there's too many to choose from. I want to talk about books that were nonfiction today from some of my favorite authors. There's some journalists, and then there's people that have made a living doing travel blogging. So I'm excited about that. The first book I want to talk about is A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson. Bill Bryson has written a lot of different books. He has, places he's went in Europe and all over. But I can't think of, I know he's went to other places. But this, A Walk in the Woods, is rediscovering America on the Appalachian Trail. So he decides that he's going to walk the Appalachian Trail, but not the same way as like Cheryl Strayed did in Wild, which I'm also going to talk about, but like bits and pieces here and there. He does walk some for multiple days, but then he like stops for a while and he ends up going to a few places like here and there and doing weekend trips and stuff like that to do as much of the trail as he can. But what's really fun and interesting is that he randomly sent out a thing that was like, hey, I don't want to do this alone, and the person that said that they would do it with him is like a buddy he never expected and is not in as good a shape as him, and it's just really fun because I can't imagine hiking with someone that I love and trust and is in the same shape as me more than a few days without us bickering. And not that they don't bicker, but they definitely make it work. And it's really good. And on top of that, he also talks about a town in Pennsylvania and the history behind it that's kind of Chernobyl-y. So that's also very interesting. So yeah, this is the first book, A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson, and it's really good. I definitely recommend it, and anything that Bill Bryson writes, because there's a fluidity that brings a lot of laughter and learning at the same time, and it's really amazing. So I definitely recommend him. The next book I am going to talk about is What I Was Doing While You Were Breeding. It's by Kristin Newman, and I read it multiple years ago, but it is about a woman who decides to travel instead of do what society told her to do, which is settle down and have children and get married. So that's cool because she gets to visit a whole bunch of different places, and I don't remember everywhere that she went. I read it a long time ago, but I do remember that it was just a really fun, easy read, and it's a good reminder that we as women in society aren't made to just live with our parents and then live with a husband and then raise children. We should be out traveling and doing things we want to do and living for ourselves. So that was really awesome as well. The next book I want to talk about is To Shake the Sleeping Self. And I read this last year. It is about a guy who grew up with very Christian parents who is gay, and he bikes from Portland to Patagonia, which is the southernmost tip of South America. And at first, I thought it was just about a guy biking from Portland to Patagonia, and I was really interested in it because that sounds like an incredible adventure, and I don't live too far from Portland, so someday that could be something that I want to do. I'd never heard of Patagonia. I've heard of it, but as a brand, if I'm being honest, not as a place. So I was really interested in that. Actually, I really want to visit now that I've read it and I've researched it and I've looked into it, and it looks incredible. But anyway, so I don't want to bike there. I biked 10 miles the other day and my butt hurt, so I don't even know how he did this. He had no training, and he biked forever, like over 2,000 miles. So that's pretty incredible. And then at the end, he hiked with his mom, actually, which was really cool, especially since as he was biking with a friend off and on, and he'd like meet up with friends in certain places, he also like thought a lot about himself and being gay and what that meant growing up in a Christian community. And as someone who is pansexual that grew up in a Christian community, there were so many things that he talked about that just I felt, and it was something that I didn't sign up for in this book. I had no idea that that was there, but I'm really glad that I read it, and it helped me learn a little more about myself. And I actually follow Jedediah Jenkins now on Instagram, and he's just so incredibly profound, and it's incredible to see where his journey has led him since then, as far as his confidence in himself and everything that he is. So that's also really incredible too. And he's written a few other books, and he's also done some other things that I look forward to digging into in the future. So yeah. The next book is Wild by Cheryl Stray, which has been adapted now, and Reese Witherspoon has been in the movie for it, so you've probably heard of it. And we recently went to the Bridge of the Gods, which was really awesome. Like unexpectedly, we went to go to a brewery, and Bridge of the Gods happened to be there, and the brewery was packed, so we didn't go anyway, but we did overlook Bridge of the Gods, and then we went to a different brewery, and the brewery was really good. That has something to do with anything. But Wild by Cheryl Stray is also a really good book. It's about a woman who just pretty much decides her life sucks, and she's going to start over by walking the Appalachian Trail, which is around me, so that's pretty cool to hear her talk about some things. Not all, like, it's a very long stretch, but it's really cool to hear her talk about some things, and just the, like, not audacity, but the courage that she has as a woman to hike alone this whole thing, also with no training. That's incredible as well. So it's a really good book. There's definitely parts where she, like, I get scared for her, so I don't even know how she did this, but she did. And yeah, it was a good book as well. The next book I want to talk about is The Ledge by Jim Davidson and Kevin Vaughn, and it is a heartbreaking book. It is about two guys who try to hike in Mount Rainier, and they end up falling into like a glacier wall, and one of them perishes. And so it's not just about an adventure and travel and friendship, but it's also about learning to live with survivor's guilt. And actually, the author has done really incredible things in not only writing the book, but also starting fundraisers and foundations to help with stuff like that. So that's really incredible. And he talks about it, you know, for his friend that unfortunately did not live through like a nightmare, essentially. And that was it's an incredibly heartfelt and hard book to read, but it was still good nonetheless. The next book I want to talk about, okay, so two books actually, both by John Krakauer, I think is how he says his name. So he is one of my favorite journalists / authors. He started as a journalist, became an author. He did Into the Wild. Something just fell. That was weird. Okay, but he did Into the Wild, which is a real, it's not his memoir, but it's him researching someone else who went into Alaska and was really ready to just be in the wild, be where man hadn't been before, and it follows his history, and then, you know, weeks before he leaves, and then he ends up found dead in a bus. No, he's never found. Yeah, he ends up never being found. And, but they did find his journal on a bus. And the 100th page, like, I'm not going to tell you all of it, like, read it, it's amazing. But, the 100th day, like, talks about stuff that kind of preludes to his death, but nobody knows how he died. So it's really good. It's very well researched, as everything by Jon Krakauer is. And I suggest anyone read it as well. The next book by Jon Krakauer is my most favorite book in the world. It's called Into Thin Air. It legit is one of my favorite books. I would recommend it to anyone. It destroyed my wanderlust. I do not want to go to Mount Everest. I have no desire to climb Mount Everest. If I ever did, I don't now. Not just because of the tragedy that happened. Jon Krakauer, like, he summited Mount Everest, and he recounts everything that happened when they thought that they were fine, and a storm comes in that kills multiple people that he was hiking with. So that is very tragic, and that alone makes me not want to go, like, ever. But also it makes me not want to go because he talks about, like, when you're so far up, you're past the timberline and you're camping and you have almost no oxygen and you don't have trees or logs and there's garbage places and people, you know, people do collect the garbage, but people are practically living up there in order to summit, and then they come back down and you have to have all this gear. So they burn poop, like, to stay warm, which you have to do. You have to burn something. They burn poop because they don't have wood, and no thank you. I'm not into that. So anyway, there's a whole lot of aspects about climbing Mount Everest I never thought about in my life. And it's just, the story is just amazing. Like, I don't even know what can top it. It's incredible. Recommend it to anyone. 5 out of 5 stars. I would give it a million more if I could. I love this book. So yes, Into Thin Air. So the next book I want to talk about is The City of the Monkey Gods, by Douglas Preston, which is about looking for, like, not the city of gold, but the city of white, like Ora Blanca, like the city of white gold, essentially, in the Amazon rainforest / Aztecs. Like, they don't know where it's at. There's a bunch of people that state that they've went looking for it, but there's research done where maybe they didn't, and they actually had ulterior motives, but then they were pretending that they were so they could get funded, but they weren't. And so nobody really knows, like, the truth about this place and what's going on with it. And it's very well researched, and it's about Douglas Preston actually goes down with a group multiple times, and at the end he talks about a disease that they get, and that's also very interesting, and that was something unexpected that I didn't expect to get from this book. And it was, like, I read it last year, so it was right after COVID, right before COVID, like, because COVID's still going, so when does it stop and when does it end, like, but anyway, so yeah, that was a very interesting book, but it didn't have, like, definitely it had adventure, but it was also very well researched, and it talked a lot about journals that they found and what people have said and done. So although he does talk about his times in the jungle, he doesn't talk about just that. So it is a travel book. He goes into the Amazonian rainforest and he searches for a long time, and he almost gets bit by poisonous snakes and, like, crazy stuff that I wish I had the courage to do. And so definitely travel, but there's also a lot of research that goes into it, so it can be a little slower, but it's also, like, really interesting. The next book that I want to talk about is also 2 books, both by Peter Allison, which is an Australian writer. So the first one is Whatever You Do, Don't Run. And Whatever You Do Not Run is an amazing book. It says True Tales of a Botswana Safari Guide. So he like flips a coin when he's a teenager right after he graduates to decide if he's going to go to South America or Australia, which you don't learn in this book, I don't think. I think you learn it in the next book I'm going to talk about, How to Walk a Puma. So this one is when he's in South America later on in life. Whatever You Do Not Run is about him in Africa, and his African safari stuff is incredible. He talks about lions, he talks about snakes, rats, elephants, jaguars, cheetahs, birds, and he just has a ton of adventures, and it's so much fun. Rhinos, hippos, I think. Like, I read this a few years ago too, but I still think about it all the time because it's an incredible adventure. And it's super cool. So one time, alligators also, like, they get stuck in a pond and there's an animal in there and they get really scared, and somehow they survived with their tour guide people. So that was a lot of fun. Like catching cagefuls of snakes and rats, not fun, but very interesting to read about. It's a really good book and I definitely recommend it. And he talks about like the gentleness of elephants and how incredible they are as well, which I think as people we hopefully all know, but we don't take it into consideration sometimes, like how amazing and incredible these animals are. So it's just a really great book. The other book, How to Walk a Puma, is not as good, if I'm being honest. It still is a good book. He does do really cool things. He talks about his job is to literally walk this puma like every day. Well, like not walk, like run and get beaten up by it, and it like randomly, playfully bites his knees and stuff. So it's different for sure. And he also talks about like when the puma's not doing well and they have to transport him, but he's like in South America and they have random gun checkpoints and like definitely some crazy stuff. So it is good, but to me it just doesn't compare to the magic that was the African safari. The last book that I want to talk about is The Whale Warriors, which is by Peter Heller. Peter Heller is definitely an author that I haven't read enough of. I've read 2 of his books. He just came out with a new book called The Guide. The Guide is fiction, but this book, The Whale Warriors, is nonfiction, and it's about his fight against, like fighting against people that are fishing illegally and whaling illegally. He worked with Greenpeace, or Greenpeace was also another boat. I'm pretty sure he worked with Greenpeace. I could be wrong. If you read it, let me know. But I read it a few years ago. Since then, I've read a few Peter Heller things. He does fiction and nonfiction. Both are very good. He's most known for The Dog Stars, which I read last year. But it's kind of plague world ruining. So it's not the best book after COVID, but it was a good book. But Whale Warriors is what got me into him, his nonfiction, where he talks about how he works to save whales and tuna. He talks about tuna and like how the Japanese are illegally fishing whales and hunting whales when they shouldn't, or how they technically can because of some things, but they're trying to stop them. So that was also really interesting to me. Most of it is on the water because they're in the water like searching for boats that are trying to hunt whales that aren't supposed to be hunting whales. And it's really interesting too. So it also has a lot of research done with it because it's also from a journalist perspective. And he talks about just the fishing industry in general and things we can and can't do and how it's hurting our ecosystem and the ocean in general, which is also very good. So those are some books that I have that are considered travel books. I consider them travel books. They're nonfiction travel books about people that have gone lots of different places. And hopefully you enjoyed it, and hopefully you find something that you like. I know that a lot of people don't read nonfiction as much as fiction, at least with other booktubers that I listen to. There is a few that are trying to read more nonfiction, and then there's some that read like strictly fantasy. So I really want to do a piece about nonfiction travel books because travel is my favorite. Adventuring is awesome. And so hopefully you pick up something good that's nonfiction and you enjoy it. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Tracy. This is Love Your Shelf. Please subscribe if you like this video, and I hope you have a great day. Namaste.